Classified Crime is on the case of Sarah Boone, and today we're going to take a look at her September phone call logs. We're going to start off with September 1st. This is starting out with Nicole at 11:09 and 11:43 a.m. The first call was a free call, and they spoke for 4 minutes, 18 seconds. At 11:43, it was not accepted. Peter, she called at 11:45. That was not accepted. It does say that was free courtesy marketing as opposed to the free call. And I did have this comment from Nicole. She said the calls that say free courtesy marketing, I believe, is GTL calling you with a free marketing voicemail to remind you to top up your account. I matched them on your call log with the missed calls I had from GTL, and they match. They can call you multiple times too. It's quite weird. So she's kind of implying that it's the company, not the inmate, calling to give you a reminder that you're low on funding. You're still receiving a call in the middle of your day. So I'm going to still include them as calls because I don't know whether or not Sarah is initiating that to remind them to fund their account or not. But that's the information I was given. Okay, another little bit of information that I got this week is from a viewer who emailed me. And this is a little clip from the email that said, an outgoing call from a prison will not connect until the intended receiver selects a number on their phone. So you can either accept, decline, or decline all future calls from the prisoner. A voicemail does not have the ability to make a selection, so the call would not connect. And this person said they know firsthand because of communicating with a family member in the situation. Now, if they choose to decline all future calls from the inmate, I wonder if it automatically just marks the call not accepted, or if it lets the inmate know that they declined all future calls or not. When I look here on August 26th, there are 3 free courtesy marketing calls to her son. It says at 16:45 it was not accepted. At 17:21 it says inmate hung up. And then at 17:23 it says not accepted. So I'm not sure how the inmate can hang up if it's not the inmate initiating the call. There's another one here that says inmate hung up. That is a free courtesy marketing, and it's in between 2 not accepted calls that were also free courtesy marketing. Moving on to September, we have Nicole, a free call for 4 minutes, 18 seconds on the 1st. Then we have a call to Nicole at 11:43 that was not accepted. Peter at 11:45, not accepted. She called Nicole at 11:47. They spoke for 46 seconds, and it says the inmate hung up. At 13:05 and 13:06, she contacted Peter. The first call was not accepted. The second call, they spoke for 5 minutes, 36 seconds. She called Nicole at 13:35 and 13:42, but it says pin lockout, and my assumption is that she had a completed call at 13:06 and she hasn't waited the full amount of time before she can make another call. Also on the 1st, all of these calls are on the 1st. So a complete page and then a part of a page, all on the 1st. On the 1st, she called Nicole at 13:42, 13:45, 13:47. Those first 2 were not accepted. At 13:47, they spoke for exactly 30 minutes until time was up. She then tried her brother at 14:27, but it says pin lockout. Because again, I don't think she waited the full amount of time after a completed call. She then tried her brother 2 more times at 14:58 and 1500, and they were not accepted. She then called Nicole at 15:12. It was not accepted. And then she called her at 15:13, and they spoke for just under 30 minutes. She called Peter 3 times at 16:45, 16:47, and 17:25. None of those were accepted. She called her brother again at 17:28. That was not accepted. Keep in mind, September 2nd would have been the deadline for the postmark of her clothes. She's probably calling these people to help her out with that. She called Peter at 17:20. She called her brother at 17:28. It was not accepted. She called Nicole at 18:32, 18:34. Those were not accepted. She then called Peter at 18:36, and they spoke for 3 minutes 46 seconds. She then called Nicole at 19:01, 19:08, and 19:10. Those were not accepted. The 19:01 says pin lockout. She then called her brother at 19:13, and that was not accepted. And then she tried Nicole at 19:15, and that was not accepted. The last call she made on the first was to Nicole at 20:21, and they spoke for 7 minutes 43 seconds. The next date is the 2nd, and this red box here is showing you that all these calls were on the day that the closing was due to be postmarked. She called Peter 3 times at 9:49, 10:24, and 14:09. None of those were accepted. She then called her brother at 14:11, and that was not accepted. So she did not get in touch with anyone on the day her closing should have been postmarked. She then called Nicole on the 3rd 3 times at 9:52, 9:54, and 10:49. None of those were accepted. She then called her brother at 14:07, and they spoke for 12 minutes 10 seconds. On the 4th, the only call she made was to Nicole at 10:33, and they spoke for just under 30 minutes. On the 6th, she didn't call anyone on the 5th. On the 6th, the only call she made was also to Nicole. She called her at 10:41, and they spoke for just under 13 minutes. On the 8th, she called Nicole twice. At 10:37, they spoke for 4 minutes 16 seconds. That was a free call. And then at 11:30, they spoke for 28 minutes. On the 11th, she called Nicole 5 times. The first 4 were not accepted. The last call at 11:15, they spoke for 29 minutes 49 seconds. On the 12th, she called Nicole 3 times back to back at 10:31. It says no answer, 10:32, no answer, 10:34, no answer. She then called her brother on the 13th. At 13:06, they spoke for 6 minutes 9 seconds. She then called Peter twice at 18:04 and 18:06. Those were not accepted. And then she called her brother again at 18:14, and they spoke for 13 minutes 45 seconds. On the 14th, she called her son 3 times. This is the first time in the month that she has called her son right here. So she called him last on August 30th and then waited 2 weeks to call him until the 14th. She called him at 11:24, and it was not accepted. She then called him at 11:25, and they spoke for just under 30 minutes. And then at 18:39, they spoke for just under 30 minutes. She then called Peter on the 14th at 21:10, and they spoke for 22 minutes, and it says the inmate hung up. That is the last call you're going to see from Peter this month. So I have the call log is ran through October 8th, and that's the last call you'll see from Peter. All right, then she misdialed 2 numbers, but they were very close to Nicole's number. They were, of course, not accepted on the 15th. She then called Nicole, and Nicole had gotten a new number. Called her on the 15th at 11:46, and they spoke for just under 5 minutes for a free call. The first 2 times she tried to call Nicole, she just had the digits in reverse. She then tried to call her son 3 times at 18:58 on the 15th. They talked for 1 second, or connected for 1 second, because it says the called person hung up. So I'm not sure if he just picked up and said, I'll call you back or what, or call me back. Then she tried him at 20:24 and 20:26. Those were not accepted. She then called Nicole twice at 20:29 and 20:31. Those were not accepted. On the 16th, she called Brian at 8:26 in the morning. It says inmate hung up. She then called her son at 8:27. This is a school day, so I'm not sure why she would do that, because he should already be on his way to school. That was not accepted. She then called Brian at 8:29 and 8:31. Those were not accepted because, again, they're probably trying to either get out the door or have already left to get to school. Or he's already gotten on the bus or whatever kind of transportation he uses. Later on the 16th, okay, 2 minutes later, not that much later, 8:33, she tries Brian again. At 8:35, she does get a hold of Brian. They talk for 7 minutes, 21 seconds, and then it says that Brian hung up. She then tried Nicole at 9:10, but there's a pin lockout because she had completed a call 30 minutes earlier. She then called Nicole at 9:11 and 9:13. Those were not accepted, but at 9:31, she got a hold of Nicole and they spoke for 30 minutes. She then tried to call Nicole again 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, but she misdialed the number, so those were not accepted. She tried her son after that at 18:51. This was not accepted. She tried him again at 18:53, also not accepted. She then tried Brian at 18:55, and they spoke for 19 minutes, 57 seconds, and then Brian hung up. So she got a hold of Brian twice in one day. She then tried Nicole, but it was a misdial on the 17th. This is the first call she made on the 17th. So the person did not accept. She did call Nicole's number correctly at 10:23, but it was not accepted. Again at 10:24, not accepted. She misdialed it again at 11:06, and it says inmate hung up. She called Nicole again at 11:07. It was not accepted. 11:10, it was not accepted. She then called her son at 9:17. On 9:17 at 18:09. She then called her son at 18:09. It was not accepted. She called her son again at 18:12, not accepted. On the 18th, she made one call to Nicole at 11:10. They spoke for 29 minutes, 55 seconds, and the inmate hung up. I should have another line here. Hold on. All right, that was the only call she made on the 18th. On the 19th, she called Nicole 9 times in a row. She started at 9:33 in the morning, 9:35, 10:42, 10:54, 10:56, 11:23, 11:25, 13:16, and 13:18. None of those calls were accepted. Also, keep in mind that Nicole is in Australia, which is a 12 to 14 hour time difference. Her son, she then called on the 19th at 17:02. They spoke for 18 minutes and 28 seconds. And then she called him again at 18:48, and they spoke for 24 minutes, 19 seconds. On the 20th, she tried Nicole 4 times at 10:54, 10:57, 11:08, and 11:15. Those were not accepted. She then called her brother at 13:15, and then again at 17:15, and those were not accepted. She called her son at 17:17, and they spoke for just under 30 minutes, and it says that her son hung up. On the 21st, she called Brian at 10:21, and they spoke for 46 seconds. She then called Nicole at 11:49. It was not accepted. She called Brian again at 12:53. They spoke for 5 minutes, 49 seconds. On the 21st, she tried her brother twice at 14:06, 14:08. Those were not accepted. She then tried her son at 14:09, and they spoke for 5 minutes, 39 seconds. She tried her brother 4 more times on the 21st at 14:45, 16:52, 16:54. Those were not accepted. At 17:25, her brother did speak to her for 14 minutes, 37 seconds. She then called her son 4 more times. At 17:57, she had pin lockout. Again, at 18:04, pin lockout. 18:08, pin lockout. And then at 18:09, she was able to talk to him for 2 minutes, 21 seconds. Then she tried her brother on the 21st at 18:35 and 18:36, but again, she had pin lockout. And then she tried her brother again at 18:39, still pin lockout. She tried him at 9:21. On 9:21. She tried him at 18:41. It was not accepted. 18:43, 18:44, and 18:46, all on the 21st to her brother, not accepted. This is still on the 21st. She called her brother 18:47, 18:49, 18:53, 1856, 1859, 1902. None of those were accepted. She then called her son at 1938, and they spoke for just under 30 minutes. Moving to September 22nd, she called Nicole at 9:05, 9:08, 9:54, 9:56, 10:50, 11:14, and 11:16. None of those calls were accepted. She then called her son at 17:39, 17:41, 18:28. The first two calls to her son were not accepted, but at 18:28, they spoke for just under 5 minutes on a free call. Then she called her son at 20:20. He did not accept. And at 20:22, they spoke for just under 30 minutes. On the 23rd, she called Nicole. It was at 8:41 in the morning and not accepted. All of these calls are on the 23rd on this page. She tried Nicole at 8:43 and 8:45. Those were not accepted. She tried her son at 8:48. Not accepted. She then went back to calling Nicole at 8:50, 8:52, 8:59, and 9:22. None of those were accepted. Misdialed her number at 9:24. She then tried Nicole again at 9:26, 10:42, 10:44, 11:07, 11:09, 11:11, 11:25, and 11:27. None of those calls were accepted. She then tried her son at 18:06, and they spoke for just under 30 minutes. She then tried Nicole again at 19:57, 19:59, 20:02, and 20:41. None of those were accepted. So she tried Nicole quite a few times on the 23rd, but Nicole was unavailable. On the 24th, she tried Nicole at 10:53 and 10:55, not accepted. She then tried her son at 17:41, and they spoke for just under 30 minutes. On the 25th, she called her son 7 times. The first call was at 17:49, and they spoke for 16 seconds. She then called him again at 18:30, 18:32, 18:43, 18:45, and 19:57. Those were not accepted. And then she called again at 19:59, and they spoke for 7 minutes, 43 seconds. On the 26th, she called her son at 10:48. It was not accepted. She then tried Nicole at 10:49, 10:51, 10:58, 11 o'clock, and 11:13. Those were not accepted. Then she called Nicole at 11:14, and they spoke for just about 30 minutes. She then called her son 2 more times on the 26th at 18:26 and 18:28, and those were not accepted. On the 27th, she tried Nicole at 11:03, and it was not accepted. She then tried her again at 11:05, and they spoke for exactly 30 minutes until time was up. She tried to call her son twice at 18:45. They spoke for 49 seconds. At 19:42, they spoke for just about 30 minutes. On the 28th, she made quite a few calls. She started with her brother at 11:01, not accepted. She then called Nicole at 11:03, not accepted. She tried Brian twice at 11:30 and 11:32. The first call was not accepted. The second call, they spoke for 7 minutes, 12 seconds. The rest of these calls are to her son. So she called her son the rest of this day. 17:42, 17:45, 19:40, 19:41, 19:43, 19:44, 19:46, 19:49, 20:06, and 20:07. None of those calls were accepted. Some of them say inmate hung up. Some of them say not accepted. Some of them say no answer. But either way, they did not connect. On the 29th, she tried her son at 18:11 and 18:13. Neither of those were accepted. On the 30th, she tried her son at 8:37, and there was no answer. And then again at 8:39, and it says inmate hung up. She then called her son at 8:40, and there was no answer. She tried Brian twice at 8:42. They spoke for 4 minutes, 24 seconds. And at 10:33, they spoke for 3 minutes, 42 seconds, and then the inmate hung up. The first call to Brian was a free call. She then tried Nicole at 10:52 and 11:03, but she had a pin lockout. She tried Nicole again at 11:06 and 11:08, and those were not accepted. She then tried Brian at 14:13. She tried her brother at 14:54. It says no answer. Brian did not accept, and her brother had no answer. She tried her son at 19:46 and 19:48. Those were not accepted. And at 19:50, they spoke for exactly 30 minutes until time was up. And that's the end of the September calls. I only have a week of October, but I have requested the rest of October, as well as her visitor log sheet, to see if anyone new has been added. For September call totals, she did not call Julian the whole month of September. She only attempted to call Peter 13 times. He accepted 3 of those for a 23% acceptance rate. She attempted calling her brother 30 times. He accepted 3 of those for a 10% acceptance rate. She tried Brian 13 times. He accepted 7 for a 54% acceptance rate. Her son, she tried 58 times, about half as much as last month of August. He accepted 18 for a 31% acceptance rate. She tried Nicole 99 times. Nicole accepted 15 times for about a 15% acceptance rate. She did not call any of the other people on the chart during September. Compare from August to September, and over to the right, you'll see the total talk time from January through September. So Julian, she did not call August or September, so his time stayed the same. Peter, you see her calls dropped significantly from August to September. He was called 31 times in August. He accepted 7. She tried him 13 times in September. He only accepted 3. He spoke to her over 3 hours in August and just over 30 minutes in September. His total amount of calls attempted in the totals is 324. He's accepted 112. He's spoken to Sarah 39 hours, 24 minutes, and 12 seconds from January through September. Brian, the amount of calls went down, but the amount he accepted went up, and his talk time went up. So he was talking to her for 5 minutes. Last month, he talked to her almost an hour this month. His total talk time over here, 4 hours, 35 minutes, and 59 seconds. Her son, she called significantly less. She only called him 58 times as opposed to 112 in August. He accepted 18, so just slightly less than August. They talked for 5.5 hours roughly. In August, they talked for 6 hours. Their total talk time, she's called him a total of 482 times since she's been at Lowell. He's accepted 146 calls from her. They've talked for 43 hours, 50 minutes, and 22 seconds. Her brother, she called 30 times. They spoke for a little over 40 minutes, not that much more than the last month. Total time she's tried to call her brother is 86. He's accepted only 17, and they've spoken for just over 3 hours over January through September. Nicole, she called significantly more than August. She had a 99 total call attempts as opposed to 68 in August. They spoke slightly more, 5 hours, just over 5 hours. In August, it was 4.5. So overall, Nicole has 362 attempted calls to her, 99 accepted, and 36 hours of talk time. David, she didn't talk to in September, so his is staying the same at 2 hours. I have requested October. I haven't received it yet. But when I get it, I will total that and complete the chart. Hopefully I can go ahead and get all the way through December, so we can just see kind of how her trends go throughout the year of 2025. And we will continue to wait for a ruling from Judge Jackson. As soon as that drops, I will cover it. In the meantime, I'll see you in the comments. Thank you so much for watching.